Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with saxophonist, composer, and educator Andrew Van Tassel. We caught up with him in March to talk about his newest 2021 CD, Shapeshifter, his life in music, and this COVID-19 world. He draws inspiration from a broad palette of genres: bebop, hard bop, fusion, indie rock, and classical music. His previous album, It's Where You Are, received international praise from jazz critics and was recognized as a top 10 release by multiple publications. This new album is poised for the same response. Get to know him and enjoy.
Thanks so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed Shapeshifter, out on March 19th, and I still find it kind of revelatory now in regards to last year. You know, a lot of CDs were coming out unbeknownst to everybody. The world was going to shut down. So now that I see the date of March again, there's music coming out. It's very refreshing.
Cool. Thanks so much. I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed it. And yeah, it is amazing that this is kind of like the 1 year mark of the shutdown, just realizing that this week. But, you know, I'm happy that I was able to kind of like close out this bizarre year with something that I'm really excited about and happy to share with the world at this point.
So talk about releasing an album during a pandemic. Did this get put off? What was kind of the idea of getting this out now, and kind of how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the project was put off by like 9 to 6 months or so. I think I remember actually having this question of about this time or April last year of, you know, I'm getting close to releasing this thing or thinking about it, but at that stage, it just seemed like it was going to be quite some time until any gigging or touring for the record was going to be possible. So the idea was basically, let's push it off, and, you know, maybe sometime by next year, it's going to seem a little bit more hopeful in terms of being able to tour this. I think there was still the expectation that, you know, we might have to wait until 2022 to do some of that, but I think doing it now was the right time for me. I think, just ready to move on from this project after having, you know, listened to it and worked on it for so long. I was kind of ready to like let it out the door and let people listen to it. And I think, you know, part of me also thought that it would just be nice for people to have something to check out right now while everyone's home and not able to go see some live music. So I'm still hoping that when things open up and folks are vaccinated, that I can get out there and play the music from this record, hopefully sooner than later. But yeah, certainly thankful that this all came together and that it's out there now.
Without a doubt. You know, there's a lot of influences. You got a broad palette of genres: bebop, hard bop, fusion, indie rock, classical, and more. How did all of this come together? Where were you born and raised, and kind of how did all of these flavors come into who you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sort of being this multifaceted, open-minded person is like a big part of who I am, or try to be, I would say. So I was born in Minnesota and have kind of like some Midwestern roots on my mom's side out there. My dad's side of the family is from New York, and those two sides, I would say, like my mom and my dad, each brought my brother and sister and I up with kind of like a different mix of musical backgrounds. My mom was really into Motown, and her dad was actually a jazz trombonist. So I had some jazz influences like fairly early on from my grandfather. And my dad was a really great classical French horn player. He no longer plays, but I always joke with the two of my parents that I was kind of like the hybrid of the two of them, like the classical world and Motown of when I got into jazz. But yeah, I'd say, like, you know, as I started to get more and more into music in high school, I was really into the rock music, classic rock. Later on, I started to get more and more into classical music, even though I was studying that in my early years of saxophone and piano and clarinet. But over the years, I've really grown, my ears have grown, I would say, and I've, like, you know, become accustomed to listening to more different types of music. There's just like so much out there and so much to get inspired by that, I don't know, I feel like when it comes to my music and my playing and writing, like, why not be influenced by all the great stuff that's out there, even if it's within kind of the context of the music that I study and play for the most part, which is kind of like the more traditional style of jazz setting with like a small combo that like has a large emphasis on improvisation, but to sort of bring some of those other elements into the table, both in terms of the composition, in terms of just like the style of improvising, and then also some of the electronics that are featured on this particular record that's coming out, which I'm really excited about and happy to be putting on display for the first time. And I think that's also a piece like really interested in running with and exploring down the road as well in some different contexts.
So what was the first live jazz show you ever saw?
That's a really good question and takes me back quite a while. I think the first one that comes to mind that like really blew my mind was when I was in middle school, and we had a pretty great high school jazz band in our school district that came to the middle school to play. And I remember hearing that and just like having my mind blown, being like, oh my God, those guys who are playing saxophone up there are just like so cool. I want to do that. This jazz music is like really awesome. Want to get into it. So I started to get more serious about playing the instrument around then. And then by the time I was a freshman in high school, had made that jazz band, and then started to get into some weekend programs like the NJ Pack Jazz for Teens program, and then wound up at Manhattan School of Music's pre-college program on the weekends. So studying jazz on the weekends in the city. And I think like from there, I just started to get more and more into it. But I would say like I wasn't necessarily really serious about a career in music until my undergrad years, when we had a couple of really big name groups come through town when I was in Chapel Hill, like Kenny Garrett's band, who I think most folks who listen to my saxophone playing can tell almost right away that he's been a massive influence on my sound and my just like overall approach to music. Also Pat Metheny's group, Robert Glasper. I think he was playing with Nick Payton one night, and that just like totally blew my mind. But yeah, I would just say like some shows like that early on in my development that like had a huge impact on me and wanting to like, you know, really figure this music out and get deeper and deeper into it.
So this is your second sophomore release. Do you feel relieved that now you can kind of move past that initial release?
Yes, totally. I think there is, I don't know if it's like a stigma or just like, you know, that the first release that's just like challenging in so many ways of like first getting yourself out there. I don't know. I would just say like I feel like I'm more in my own skin with this second release because in part I've done it before. I also am just like really excited about the music for this record that's coming out, and think that it leaves me excited to like dive into a couple of different directions for different projects after this. And I would say that as like a composer as well, I think I'm ready to like sink my teeth into new music after having focused so much energy on this particular project for a while.
Let's talk a little bit about mentors and people in your life that have given you the advice and teaching that it's led you to where you're at right now.
I was really fortunate to have a number of fantastic saxophone teachers growing up. There was a guy named Fred Zarnecki who was just like the middle school band director who just really got my saxophone chops in a pretty good spot when I was in middle school and high school. And then by the time I was doing some of these weekend programs that I mentioned before, I was studying with guys like Bruce Williams, who's a fantastic player in the New York scene, Jacob Manricks, who's now on the West Coast but was a New York guy for a while. And then after there, I had some great college professors as well, Stephen Anderson down in UNC Chapel Hill and Jim Ketch there. And then in grad school, studied with like some really fantastic superstar players like Donnie McCaslin, Miguel Denon, Jerry Bergonzi, Jason Moran, a lot of those guys who all just like had such different ideas for me. And it was kind of cool to like absorb and just like consider many of the variable thoughts that each of them had, either about playing or just about like life in general. And, you know, aside from like my musical mentors who have like had a massive impact, obviously, on my playing, my improvising, my writing, just from kind of like a life standpoint, I'm very close with my parents, and like they've had a pretty large impact on just like my life, I would say, and my wife as well, my family and my friends. So I would consider them all to be mentors as well. But if there was one like standout, I would say Steve Anderson from my undergrad years. He's a great piano player and composer. He's someone who I really like admired and learned a lot from in my undergrad years, and I actually ended up playing on one of his records when I was in college, and that was kind of like my first professional recording experience. And it was just like such a blast to get a taste of that. And like after doing that, I think I just knew like, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the studio and be able to record music. Yeah, Steve's just like, he's taught me so much about like being a good person and you know, how to be a professional musician. And I certainly really appreciate all of that tutelage.
What do you like the best about being a musician? When you wake up every day, what do you look forward to?
That's a really great question. I would say maybe in part like the unknown. Something that I love about this art form in particular is how there is uncertainty involved. And I guess going like a step further, knowing that there's always an opportunity for growth, and that this is something that I can work on for the rest of my life, hopefully. and something that I can get better at the rest of my life as well. Like, I want the next record to sound even better than this one, and, just continue to, like, up my game. That's, like, one thing that kind of, like, gets me up in the morning, knowing that, when I get to my music today, like, I'm going to be working it and trying to get better. The other part, like, the things that I just love about music generally is just that, like, it just makes me feel so good, like connecting with other humans to play. There's, like, no other feeling like it. And I'm sure a lot of jazz musicians would say that, especially from, like, the improvisational standpoint. And I find practice and performance, like, meditative to an extent. I just feel, like, refreshed after I play, unlike any other type of work really I've ever done in my life. Yeah, I would say those are a couple of the things that I just really love about the music, and why I feel like, even if I tried, I would never be able to fully put it down, because I just can't stop playing, man, and listening.
What do you miss the most about that old world back in March of last year that you're looking forward to getting back to?
Yeah, I mean, I think so many folks miss this, right? Just the normalcy of being able to spend time with each other, with humans, especially for music like jazz that is so historically social, that, obviously requires, like, collaboration that's live with humans, as opposed to doing these, like, like from far away live stream performances with each other. Like, if I'm in New York or New Jersey playing on screen with someone who's in, like, California or wherever, it's just a different feeling. I think we just miss, like, spending time with each other, and also playing music for humans in a live setting. There's just no other feeling like that. And, I really certainly hope that we can all get there sooner than later.
What do you hope we realize about this absence of live music? Like, when we come back, silver linings we take from this time away?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I hope that most folks who aren't musicians realize how, like, depraved they were of the arts over this last year. I hope there's a burning desire for a lot of folks just to, like, get out and see live music, and also to support the art, because, like, this has been a brutal year for so many artists across the board, from music venues to, anyone who's an independent artist. I would just really hope that, there is kind of like a rallying cry for the arts as soon as things start to open up. We'll see how it goes, but I think in the U.S. in particular, as I understand, things have been fairly, challenging for artists over a number of recent years, and maybe this is a silver lining for this to be kind of a wake-up call for folks to get back out there and go hear some live music and spend some time together and support each other.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, that you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I'm still figuring that out, which is part of the fun and part of the journey. I'd say I like to think that I am a hardworking person, and someone who is open-minded and is a listener, and someone who's, like, very, very much geared towards growth, always improving and trying to figure out ways to, like, see the world in a new light. There are always challenges that are involved with that, and it's part of what makes life so interesting. I'm also someone who has a lot of different interests. I studied economics and music in school, and that's something that I've continued to do, and something that I care about. And I think that will always be a part of me, as someone who has, multiple interests in things, not necessarily just specific to playing jazz or writing jazz music. And I think some of those things in my life and other interests have, influenced my music, and vice versa. But yeah, I would say, just doing the best that I can to be the best, most open-minded person that I can be is what I'm going for, I guess.
Right on, man. That was a great answer. Great way to wrap everything up. Hey, man, Andrew, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me again, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Andrew for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.